In the state of Mexico, in the most rural areas, both towns and mountains, stories, legends, and personal experiences are told about the nightmarish creatures known as brujas, but for simplicity let's just call them witches. I am here to translate some of those stories for your pleasure. These stories are told by elderly folk who witnessed these stories firsthand or through word of mouth. Welcome to this channel where we will dive into these stories. You may or may not find them spooky, but nevertheless I hope you will enjoy. Witch story from Reddit. The story goes that my great-great-grandmother had been a stubborn Protestant when she married my great-great-grandfather, and although she did convert to Catholicism, she held on to the belief that baptism should be a choice. They had their first child and were very happy for a time, but still my great-great-grandmother would not let us baptize our child. The first year of the child's life has passed and he's begun to walk. My grandparents were so proud. One night they put him to bed and they themselves turned in for a head start on what would be yet another sleep-deprived night. Such is life with an infant. For whatever reason they fell into a deep sleep, but apparently my great-great-grandmother felt something was wrong and sat bolt upright. My grandma tells me that the first instinct her mother had was, I will go check on the child, and that is what she did. The baby room was adjacent to theirs. We were once a rich family, so a multiple bedroom home was a status symbol in the town. They tried to open the door but found it to be locked from the inside. By that time my great-great-grandfather had woken up, and almost immediately they heard the most inhuman cackle from the other side of the door. After some struggling they managed to get the door open and the child was gone. She told my great-grandmother that,
En este momento, sentí como mi mundo entero se había acabado.
Roughly translated, she said she felt like her world had ended. All that was left of my would-be great-great-granduncle was an empty crib and the pain in the hearts of his parents. Fast forward around 100 years, I'm born. The firstborn son of my generation, the eldest of all the grandchildren like the child would have been. My grandmother forces my baptism as early as possible. The house we had been living at the time was adjacent to a notorious home in our city that was reportedly a hive for occult activity. We were poor, so a house in the slums was all we could afford. One night, just after my first birthday, my mother woke up much the same way as her ancestor did a century ago to find a locked door to my room. The door opens after some struggling, but I'm unharmed. The window is open, which had been closed, and a feeling of evil pervaded the room, or at least that's what my mother says. The Witch's Violin. The story takes place in 1923. There was a town with a little more than 130 inhabitants, including a woman who was known only as Juana. She was an elderly woman, with completely gray hair, who always looked unkempt. She had a prominent nose and had a very slim build, that along with her strange attitude and mysterious personality earned her the nickname of the Witch. Not much was known about her. It's said that she was one of the first people to inhabit the village. Her house was the furthest away, located on the outskirts of town by a river. People began to spread rumors about her, but all that was known was that she played the violin at 9 p.m. every day. There was a melancholic melody that always made the inhabitants' hair stand on end. The parents would never let their children play near her house, nor did anyone ever go see her, and every time the woman played the violin, the entire town would lock themselves in their home and prepare to sleep. It was something of a custom. The parents would tell their children they had to go to bed at that time or the witch would eat them. One night, around 8 p.m., horrifying screams were heard. It turned out that the witch's house was on fire. They thought it was a candle that fell to the ground. Everyone watched as the old woman was burned alive, and no one came to help her, until the police arrived and found what was left of her charred body. They buried her remains in what was left of the garden of her house. After all, no one knew her or if she had relatives. That night, everyone tried to go to sleep as if nothing happened. Everyone was about to sleep, until an unsettling feeling was felt throughout the whole town. At 9 a.m., the violin that was usually played by that woman who was supposed to be dead was heard throughout the town, causing everyone to panic and lock themselves in their homes. The inhabitants thought that the witch had returned to torment them all. When the violin was not heard, one of the children disappeared. The first was the blacksmith's son. The next morning the body of the child was found, who was missing his arms and head. After the police took him away, all the people of the town went home to forget the whole event. Every time the violin did not play, a child disappeared and was found until the next morning, but without head or arms. Terrified people protected their children and even slept with them in an attempt to keep them safe, but it was in vain since the children kept disappearing. There were so many disappearances that a month later there were no more children, except for one, me, the youngest. Now it was the adults, who went missing. Day by day they began to disappear, and even the bravest feared for their lives. One afternoon those of us who were left got together and went to the house of the witch. They were going to take the remains to another place, but the violin began to play, and a specter appeared in front of everyone, playing the violin. I was not a witch, you turned me into this, and now I've turned into what you fear. Do you want to see your children? She said as she raised the violin. The violin was probably the worst part. Those who saw it said it was made from the limbs of the missing children. The remaining people ran back to their homes in fear as the witch cackled in amusement. The cackling lasted throughout the night as everyone huddled in their homes in fear. Days later, I told my mother that I was the one who caused the witch's house to catch fire. I told her how it happened. That night I went with a couple of friends who wanted to see what the witch's house looked like from the inside, and I decided to accompany them, a decision I would regret. When we arrived and managed to sneak inside her home, we saw her cooking some type of soup. We saw the violin without its case when I approached it to get a better look. The old woman came back and saw us looking around. She threw a candle at us because she thought we were thieves, and we ran away, but the candle she threw set the door on fire. Not much of a surprise considering her house was made from wood and dried branches. The fire quickly spread to the rest of her house. We all heard the screams of the old woman, but instead of helping her, we ran to the village. My mother was silent and told me,
"Don't tell anyone about this."
A few days later my mother and father disappeared and I was the only one left in the village. I haven't heard the violin for a couple of days now. She knew I was one of the kids who caused the fire. That's probably why she saved me for last. It's almost 9 a.m. The time when the first kid went missing. I have a feeling I will be joining them soon.